everyone, and welcome to Back to the Box Office, the show where we typically review the biggest movies of today, comparing them to the biggest movies of 1999, but because of the way the box office has gone this week, we're going to repeat with Toy Story being number one. We're going to take a little break and just kind of examine the box office as a whole up to this point in the year 2019. My name is Danny. I'm joined, as always, by Marcus.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
All right, Marcus, you want to just kind of get into it with the overall numbers for the year and where we stand in relation to the years prior?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, or the biggest takeaway that I want to say for this episode is that the box office is generally down for the year. I mean, there's been numerous reports about this, but I kind of figured I want to talk a little bit about this in depth itself. So basically, as of today, or as of right now, that being July 2nd, the box office for the year right now worldwide is $5.6 billion, roughly. To put that number in perspective, we're down 9.9% compared to 2018. 2018. We're down 0.7% from 17, 0.3% from 16. But, although those numbers don't sound terrible right off the bat, I think the big thing to consider is that, Endgame came out. So like I said, the total box office numbers for the year is $5.6 billion. Endgame made $2.7 billion. So, I mean, Endgame almost made half of all the money that the box office made this year. And, even though it's crazy to think about this because, time flies by so fast, but we're already more than halfway through the box office. Like, we're already more than halfway through releases this year. I mean, it's already the first week of July, so it's quite a bit of money for one movie to account for basically half of the box office. And if you go a little bit further too, so the three highest grossing films this year, they're all Disney. It was Endgame, Captain Marvel, and Aladdin. And as of now, those three films put together roughly have made $4.7 billion between the three of them. So Captain Marvel was $1.1 billion, and Aladdin is at $878 million, something like that worldwide. Aladdin probably will get over $900 million, something like that. Those three films by themselves, made up $4.7 billion out of the total gross for the year being $5.6 billion for the worldwide box office. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple ways you can look at it. I mean, for one, I guess you could say, well, at least for the industry, thank God that those movies came out, because if they hadn't, I think there would be a lot more news reports about like movie theaters maybe potentially closing, honestly. And secondly, that's less than $900 million have been made on every other film this year. And again, that's every other film this year. That's bad.
It's been a lackluster year for sure. I mean, we've talked about it sort of week after week, with a few exceptions. But Disney, I think I was reading an article in the Hollywood Reporter this morning, and they're reporting that Disney currently has a 40% market share for movies this year in terms of the box office. So the numbers that you just said represent 40% of the box office, and then the next number two is Warner Brothers with something like 15%, 15.5 around there. It's heavily weighted. I mean, there's really no two ways about it. All of the IP that Disney's been gobbling up for the past few years has really come to bear on the box office results that we see. I mean, thank God for Disney and for Marvel for keeping it afloat. But that's not to say necessarily that if those properties weren't being released by Universal or Paramount, that they wouldn't be similarly successful. It just so happens that Disney had the foresight and also the funds to secure those properties, and they've done a great job with them. I think that's also key, is that you talk about, it is pretty remarkable, Avengers accounting for more than half, or just about half.
It's almost half.
Of the box office this year, and that is shocking for one movie to be. I mean, that is a unique case, given that it's a culmination of this 10-year long journey, 12-year-long journey, but it also happens to be a really good movie, in my opinion, and it's people may like it more than others, but I think there's no denying that it's a really well-made comic book blockbuster movie. They service the characters well, and in doing so, they are servicing the fans who have been following those characters, and so essentially Disney and Marvel were rewarded for what I think is carrying that franchise successfully, whereas a lot of the other box office sort of disappointments that we've seen, I think there's talk of franchise fatigue, and that definitely plays into it. But I think it's also just a case of them not being very good movies. We've had good movies come out this summer, like Avengers Endgame. In my opinion, I think Aladdin overperformed based on what people's expectations were when the trailers first came out and all that. And you had stuff like John Wick, which I think, for what that movie is, it's a very, very great representation of that sort of old school action movie that we don't get too much of. So when you do good in a franchise, in a particular genre, you make a good film, I think audiences respond. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you get the Dark Phoenixes and the Godzillas, and you're banking on the property itself, but then the end result of all the work that goes into making that movie doesn't result in something that's a good product. I think there's consequences, and the consequence is a lackluster box office.
No, I mean, I think you're totally right, and I guess I should probably clarify a little bit. So that, I guess, at $5.6 billion, that was domestic. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I guess it's not first, because I was thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, that sounded a little too high, but yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I mean, for a lot of these, I kind of think it's a combination of why the box office is a little bit underperformed this year. I think there's a combination of bad movies for sure. Yeah, like you said, Dark Phoenix and Godzilla, definitely those are bad movies.
And those both, and then we get Pikachu's. I mean, this kind of movies that underperformed, and I think those are Warner Brothers, right?
Exactly.
Are they all three?
Warner Brothers for Pikachu and Godzilla.
Yeah,
those both were. I mean, I feel like, there's been certain films this year where I kind of feel like they just also got hit with bad luck a little bit. Like, for example, Secret Life of Pets 2. I mean, I remember talking about this for the Back to Box Office for that episode. Like, I mean, I never saw the first one, so I can't directly compare them to say, okay, which one was worse than the other. But, like, I mean, Secret Life of Pets 2 way underperformed compared to the first one. And it's like, was that kind of an element of just bad luck, kind of? Or, look at a movie like Detective Pikachu. I would have thought, 2 months before it came out, I thought that movie was going to make a lot of money, and it didn't. And I mean, we both saw it together, and I thought it was a good movie. Yeah. But it didn't really do that well. And then, look at other films like, oh my gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Like, man, I wish I could remember it. But, like, yeah, I mean, there's just movies where you kind of look and you're like, wow, that's weird that it didn't do better. Or, like, even like Toy Story. Like, even though Toy Story by no means is doing, like, poorly. But, like, I would have thought Toy Story would do numbers that were better than Incredibles 2. And, I mean, it's not as of yet. I mean, Incredibles 2 made more money in 1 weekend than Toy Story has so far being released for like 11 days.
2 weeks.
Yeah. So I mean, those things to me, if you had asked me, a month ago, if I would have said, well, I think it's gonna make more money, Toy Story, Incredibles 2, I definitely would have said Toy Story 4. But I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think are people just burnt out by it? Because another thing too that's huge this year is that it feels. I mean, I know people say this all the time, but this year really feels like we're just rehashing old stuff. Like, it just feels so much like, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, no, I agree. My personal take on when looking at the movies that were coming out this year, particularly this summer, I wasn't especially excited for any of them because of that sense that, okay, these are things that I love. Toy Story. I wasn't clamoring for a fourth. I don't think many people were clamoring for it. I think that's the big distinction between Incredibles and Toy Story. As a property, there was pent-up demand for Incredibles, and in my opinion, Incredibles 2 is a better version of what I hoped that movie could be than Toy Story 4 was in relation to the movies that came before it, if that makes sense. The sentence was a little convoluted, but what I'm saying is that my expectations for an Incredibles sequel were met based on the first film,
I see.
Whereas my expectations for a Toy Story movie maybe were not as fulfilled based on my high regard for the first 3 entries in that series.
So you had higher expectations for Toy Story 4, and because they were higher, and in my case as well, like, it just wasn't met because I didn't think it was on. Because the Toy Story original trilogy was just so good that even though the fourth one's not bad, it just didn't meet that level.
Yeah, and I mean that's just my take. Like, that doesn't obviously account for the box office, and like you said, it's by no means a disappointment. It held pretty well. I think it dropped around 50%, which is relatively good for a movie of that type in the summertime, and especially in this summer where we've seen some pretty drastic drops. Like, I think, not that it's in the same category, but Child's Play dropped something like 75% week over week. Which
yeah, because I mean, Toy Story, like you said, I mean, it's over $500 million right now.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. Thinking about, I mean, like a complete rehash of things that we've already seen. Even this past weekend, we had Annabelle. What was, I don't even know what it's called.
Origins
Creation, again? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Creations maybe. But it's like the 4th or 5th entry in that franchise if you include like the La Lloronas, those kind of offshoots.
Then the Conjuring. Yeah, I mean, this is like
the Conjuring universe, and it was the worst performing of any of those movies. By all accounts, it wasn't a terrible movie. I don't think the critics lambasted it that badly. Taylor, my fiance, she saw it, and she's generally a horror movie fan. No, she saw it. She didn't see. I didn't see it with her, but she liked it. I actually kind of like most of those movies. My least favorite one is The Conjuring 2. I did not see La Llorona, but
I liked Conjuring 1 a lot.
I like Conjuring 1. I actually liked Annabelle. Whatever the last Annabelle movie, I think it was the origin. Whatever
was that the one
prequel.
with the well?
Yeah, I actually
saw the
liked
one
that
with the
one.
well. Yeah, that was.
So anyway, I'm just saying, like, it didn't. Looking at it on the calendar 3 months ago, I wasn't like marking it down. Not that I mark things down in the calendar because I'm not, a
for movie releases.
Man. Yeah. But
at least,
you know, you get the point. Nothing. The only thing in my calendar that I was circling, in addition to Endgame, which obviously I was excited about, and Toy Story because of my adoration for the franchise. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that's the Quentin Tarantino of it all, and
even for
Brad
that movie,
Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I mean that film, I'm also really looking forward to it. But I mean, I'm under, I would be surprised if it made more than like $40 million opening weekend.
Right,
but that's not a juggernaut box office type movie.
Yeah, but I think it's the kind of movie that I think is needed to supplement the other kind of major box offices, especially when those box office blockbusters are as they're supposed to be aren't performing. It's like in NBA terms, if you have level superstar, if you got LeBron James who's not performing, you need that guy to come in and step up.
A role player.
Yeah, you need that J.R. Smith to come in and seal the deal.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's one. I guess that would be my main thesis for the box office this year, is that everything just seems like we've seen it so much, with the exception with Endgame. Even though we've seen so many films on entry, it was kind of like, here's the accumulation of everything, here's the end of it all. And Captain Marvel, that was the first time we'd ever really seen her on screen. I mean, I didn't really think it was that great of a movie, but at least it was fresh or whatever. But everything else feels so like we've seen it a million times. But even with that still being said, I mean, we've never seen a Detective Pikachu movie or a Shazam movie.
Yeah.
And Shazam, that's another Warner Brothers movie that, I mean, so Shazam came out, I think it was like February, I think it came out February, because Captain Marvel came out in March. So I mean, you're Warner Bros. You release Aquaman in December, and that makes over $1 billion. I think it was like 1.1 billion. And then, Shazam comes out, which is right off the heels of Aquaman. And Shazam, I don't even think made $400 million worldwide. So it was like, and Shazam got like really good reviews. I think it had the best reviews of any DCEU film. I think it even had a higher Rotten Tomato score than Wonder Woman. Or if it wasn't, it was like right below it. So maybe one was 92, one was 91, something like that. But like, that's, I don't know what to say for Shazam. I mean, that's just, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, because if you look at the superhero films before that, it was like Venom did really well, Aquaman did phenomenal. Captain Marvel did great, obviously, even better than Aquaman, and then Endgame just blew everything out of the water. But like, why did Shazam not perform? And that's the weird thing. You look at films like that, you're like, what was that? Or even Detective Pikachu. Like, there's been a Pokemon renaissance kind of over the last few years, where there's a lot of interest in the franchise that exists today than existed, let's say, 10 years ago. And you have Ryan Reynolds in it. It's a big budget film. I thought the marketing was good, and
I don't know. It's been a particularly odd year for Warner Brothers because he's, like you mentioned, that there's also the Lego Movie, which
that's another. I totally forgot about.
Maybe the Lego Movie. Maybe it was just a factor. There's no one definitive answer for any of these things. It's difficult to assess. But like, when did the original Lego Movie come out? Was that 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah, they came out 5 years ago.
Yeah,
they waited 5 years between between 1 and 2.
That's too long of a gap, in my opinion. The kids who were really excited to saw that movie, like, they're not gonna, 5 years. I mean, kids have attention spans. They're refreshing their Twitter feed every minute, so they're not going to wait 5 years. You're not going to wait for something for 5 years and still hold that same amount of interest. And maybe that's kind of the same thing with Toy Story. We have like a 9-year gap. Maybe it is that you need to do more quick follow-ups on these franchises, but then the problem is that with those quick turnarounds, it doesn't give you time to get a great product, and so it's kind of self-fulfilling failure.
I mean, I've always kind of thought, I mean, I might be wrong about this, but I feel like I've heard somebody mention it before, that like 3 years is kind of a good window between when a new sequel should come out. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think for Lego Movie, that, you know, when the first one came out, that was like a really fresh thing where it's like, oh my gosh, like the animation looked cool, the humor was good. And I mean, I feel like in my mind, that was kind of like the pre-Chris Pratt rollout, because, you know, that like the same year that he did Lego Movie, he did Guardians of the Galaxy 1.
Yeah.
And Guardians of the Galaxy 1 obviously blew him to being an A-lister, but like I kind of feel like with the Lego Movie that was kind of what at least really introduced me to who he was by name. And yeah, like people really liked it. And then you fast forward to today and it was like people could kind of care less about the Lego Movie. I mean, maybe it's because the Lego Movie, you know, they did the Batman Lego one and they did that Ninjago movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but I mean, if you're Warner Bros, I mean, yeah, I kind of feel like you kind of got the shaft inadvertently, because it's like Shazam got good reviews, didn't do well. Detective Pikachu, pretty good reviews, didn't do that well. Lego Movie 2, I think it got like a 90 on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it also got really good reviews. Like near, I think the same as the first one. Way worse. Yeah,
that's got to be tough, and that contradicts what I said earlier about like just making good movies will help them. I mean, by all accounts, these were good movies. Of the three that you just, Pikachu is the only one that I've seen of those three that we just talked about. The other two, just for me personally, I don't have an interest in those properties, even though I like the original Lego Movie, but I'm like one of those kids refreshing their Twitter feeds. Like, I just got too much stuff going on. I don't have time to worry about Lego
I
movie.
watched the second Lego Movie. I mean, I saw all three. I mean, I kind of thought Shazam was a little overrated, and I kind of thought Lego Movie 2 was kind of like boring. Like, it was better than the Ninjago movie, but I think it was worse than the first Lego Movie and then the Batman Lego. But yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like they just got kind of a little bit of like the short end of the stick for that. But yeah, I mean, even for Disney, I mean, they even though they've done very well with those three releases, Aladdin, Captain Marvel, and for Endgame, and you know, Toy Story, I don't think Toy Story 4 will make as much as Toy Story 3, but now that it's over the $500 million mark worldwide, I feel like Toy Story 4, I mean, I might be wrong, but I think that'll probably be, it's so weird to think this, but there's a possibility that Toy Story 4 can make less than Aladdin worldwide. Mm. I think that there's definitely a possibility that Toy Story 4 makes maybe like 800-ish million, which by no stretch is a failure. I mean, it's 200. It could probably make maybe around 200 million less than Toy Story 3. But, I mean, by no means, it won't be a failure by any stretch. Yeah, I mean, even for Disney, I mean, because they had Dumbo, that didn't really perform well. I feel like they had another film, too, that I'm trying to remember what it was that didn't do that well. But, yeah, I mean, even for them, I don't think that everything is necessarily, like, a concrete, like, it's going to make a ton of money. And, like, that kind of also leads, because initially when I thought of this episode, I was looking at, the numbers for Far From Home and kind of their predictions, so this episode is being recorded on Tuesday, so it'll be released tomorrow. But, for this weekend, I think there was some industry people that were suggesting that the movie could make something like 180 or 170 to 190 for the like holiday weekend release. So I guess that would basically be Wednesday the 3rd till the Monday, after the 4th of July.
Yeah.
But then, Box Office Mojo, they have the movie only making $80 million on the weekend. So there could be a steep difference. I mean, the same thing happened with Toy Story 4, where Box Office Mojo, I believe on the Thursday before the movie came out, they had projected that Toy Story 4 was going to open at like 165, something like that. Like, I think it was around 165, and the movie ended up making like 120 the opening weekend. So, like, I don't know, from Far From Home, I would have thought a week ago, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a slam dunk. This is going to make a ton of money. And now I don't know. And then it also just makes me think I'm less confident even in like a Lion King movie. Like, is that I would have thought earlier this year. I thought Lion King could have been a potential $2 billion film. Like I really thought Lion King could be just gigantic. Now I'm far more skittish about those kind of predictions. Is certain.
And we talked a little bit about projections last week, and I don't know what those. I don't put too much stock in the numbers being projected weeks in advance of release, let alone the like day months. Before. Yeah. With Spider-Man, I mean, Spider-Man is the box office receipts for Spider-Man will go towards Sony's books at the end of the year, not Disney.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Disney gets a little slice, but yeah, it's a Sony thing.
Yeah, well, Disney, I think the deal is that Disney gets like the merchandising.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah, and Sony gets the film box office. But hey, I'll be interested to see what it does. I mean, it should be fun. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy with Far From Home is that like I think Sony is slowly turning into a studio that's only going to probably in the future release Jumanji films and Spider-Man films. Because if you think about it, like this will be like when they release Far From Home, this will be the third Spider-Man related film that's come out in 9 months. They had Venom in October, Into the Spider-Verse in December, and now this like three. I mean. That's a lot, and obviously Jumanji 2. They must have called up all those actors immediately after the first one got released, and they saw that it was a hit, and started filming them immediately.
Yeah, that's quick. That's what we're talking about.
Because that's less than a 2-year turnaround.
Did you see the trailer?
I did see the trailer.
What'd you think?
I actually kind of think it looks alright. Like I thought the first one was a little like it's one. I think the first one was one of those films where it's like it's just. I don't know if it was a food, it'd be like a bag of chips. Like it's just kind of fun. It's kind of like that. I mean, it's something deep, but I kind of thought the same thing for this. I think it's funny that Danny DeVito and Danny Glover are in it.
Yeah. So my big issue is that I would love to see a movie where Danny DeVito is acting like The Rock, not the other way around. I want more Danny DeVito on screen. I don't, that's the whole selling point for me. You put Danny DeVito in the jungle. Running across bridges that are collapsing with a bunch of CG monkeys. How is that not $1 billion movie? Guaranteed.
Yeah, the first one I think made like a little under $1 billion.
The first one was crazy. Like I remember it came out around when a week or two after The Last Jedi, I think.
Yeah, it was like that. Towards the end of 2017.
Yeah, both that and The Greatest Showman were like in the top 5 of the box office for like 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I mean, they had incredible legs.
Yeah, they did. Before that Jumanji, whatever, Into the Jungle, is that what it's called? Because the new one's called
the Next Level.
Next Level, yeah. I guess the third one's gonna be called Next Level. But when the 2017 one came out, before it came out, I was thinking like, oh, this will probably do as well as like all those other Rock and Kevin Hart films. I feel like they've been in like 5 films together, even though it's probably only like 2.
Yeah, it might be one. Central Intelligence.
Is that just it? And then the 2 Jumanjis?
I can think of.
Like I thought it was gonna probably do something like Central Intelligence, maybe a little bit better than that. But then I was blown away by the numbers. I was like, whoa, this is like crazy.
It was probably helped a lot by how dour the reaction was to The Last Jedi.
Yeah, that's probably a good point.
That movie was so self-serious and dark, and then here's this movie that's totally just silly and fun. Like you said, like a bag of chips or like I don't know. I mean, it was a nice remedy. It's weird to think of that as counter-programming to something that everyone should theoretically be clamoring for and loving. But The Last Jedi was just so divisive. People were like, I'd rather see a P.T. Barnum musical than have to deal with...
Well, you're right. For those 2 films, in comparison to Star Wars, is like... I mean, even though we actually saw Star Wars together, and we both absolutely hated it. Yeah. Like, when I don't know anybody... You could walk out of Episode 8 with a smile on your face. I think it was very depressing watching that movie.
Yeah, it wasn't a fun time in the theater.
Yeah, it wasn't fun, right? And like that was kind of a big trend. I'm sure a lot of people probably remember this. Like, I would say like after The Dark Knight came out, there was like that trend of like late thousands, early to mid 2010s, where like all the blockbusters were kind of like they felt really dark and serious, like. Like Star Trek Into Darkness, and gosh, I wish I could remember some other, like even like the first Godzilla, even though it was good, like it was just kind of dark, and you didn't feel really happy when you're watching it. Yeah, like The Greatest Showman on Earth, and especially like Jumanji. I mean, they're both
The Greatest Showman. The Greatest Show on Earth is a
totally movie. You're right. Both of those films, they were very colorful, and you smiled. Like when I was watching, Jumanji, like I was smiling and like having a good time, and like I watched at the theater like with a smile on my face. I mean, if somebody could trash and they could probably say, well, it's not as good as the original, and the original was dark. I mean, somebody could say that too, which I get that. Like I almost kind of view this Jumanji as being like totally unrelated. It just happens to share the same name as the Robin Williams one, but like, it was just fun. And like I kind of feel like, I mean, for this year, I mean, I guess you could probably say the box office films. I do think that kind of trend of like dark, kind of serious blockbusters, I kind of feel like we've kind of moved out of that now. I do feel like it's become a little bit lighter and more fun, but
yeah, like Shazam.
Yeah, I mean, even though it wasn't necessarily great, but so I guess one thing I wanted to, I guess we've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but even though, so the box office, like we said, it's down almost 10% this year. What are some movies, in your opinion, that are coming out this year that you think could potentially kind of remedy this issue? Like, what are some movies coming out you think that could potentially, I don't know if I want to say save the box office, but definitely like help it out in a major way?
Yeah, I think we talked about a couple. I think you might have mentioned Frozen 2. I don't. Maybe that was before, but I think The Lion King has a legitimate shot of being still like, at least $1 billion movie, which I wouldn't be surprised if it went either way, if it underperformed because of what we're talking about, like it's just a straight rehash. But I think there's adoration enough or affinity enough for that original movie that it's going to carry over into the box office this year. So I would say The Lion King for sure. I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it's not going to be like on that level, but I think it has a shot of making at least 200 million plus at the domestic box office. I wouldn't be shocked.
Do you think a film like Sean Hobbs and Star Wars Episode 9, do you think that those films could make a ton of money?
I think Star Wars, especially because it's the last in the Skywalker saga, and it's J.J. Abrams coming back, and I think it's going to be, people love a redemption story, and after, no matter what you thought about the movie, about Episode 8, you cannot deny its divisiveness, and so if for no other reason than just to be at least a part of the conversation, should that type of divisiveness continue with this movie, I think it's going to it's going to be huge. I even think like...
Do you think Episode 9, do you think that'll do... So Episode 8 made what, like 1.3 billion, and The Force Awakens made like a little under 2.1 billion. Do you think Episode 9 like will be somewhere in the middle, maybe like 1.5, 1.6 billion?
Yeah, I would, that's a safe bet.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking. I've thought that kind of like this whole year too, but
there's even like, there's the Joker movie.
Yeah,
I don't know how well that's going to do, but I'm certainly interested in it and to see what it can do. What else is coming out?
So there's Maleficent 2, Frozen 2, Lion King, Spider-Man Far From Home, Sean Hobbs, Jumanji 2. I kind of feel like, there's It 2. I don't really know. I would be a little surprised if It 2 made the same money as It 1. Like,
yeah, I would as well.
I don't think It 2 will be a disaster or bomb, but I just feel like It 1 came out at a really good time. Like, it had the kid from Stranger Things, and it was kind of, the whole idea of the film taking place in the 80s with these kids.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I haven't really even seen any of the marketing for It 2 yet, so, I guess, like, their contemporary time, right? Or, like, because everyone now is an adult or whatever.
Yeah, for the most part, I think it's going to take place.
So, I would be surprised if it did as well, because I think It 1 made, like, $700 to $800 million, something like that. And I think It 2 will probably be something more like 5, maybe. It's a horror film. Horror films don't necessarily, or they don't really that often make that much.
No, that was surprising. You had Get Out, you had It, but then this year you had Us, which didn't do as well as Get Out.
Because I think Us did like less than 300 million worldwide,
which is still really good.
Yeah,
based on
very
its budget,
good.
But
well, what are some big, like, out of those ones that we just listed right now? Like, which of those you think has the highest likelihood of like bombing, or like not necessarily bombing in the sense of like being a loss, but which of those could you see like way underperforming?
I would say Maleficent.
I think Maleficent for sure.
Yeah, I don't see that being on anyone's radar or anyone's wish list necessarily.
Well, with Maleficent too, that film suffers a lot of the same issues of Lego Movie 2. Like, they both came out in 2014, Maleficent 1 and Lego Movie 1. And I don't know why on earth they took them 5 years to make Maleficent 2.
I also haven't seen that much, advertising.
Yeah, the marketing that's another thing too, I feel like, with this year is that I don't think that the marketing for a lot of these films has been that great. Like, for example, like Lion King, I don't think the marketing has been that good for it up until now. Like, I don't think it's really been that great. Like, I feel like I've only for the first time heard Donald Glover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Donald. I don't know. We've talked about Danny Glover. Now I'm confusing, but like, I feel like I've only heard him talk as Simba, like in a trailer that came out like a week ago.
Mm.
I mean, the film comes out like it took like a month before the film came out. You released his voice. Like, I feel like that wasn't.
I think the less they show that, the better, because it's probably a shot-for-shot remake. So,
yeah, that's probably true.
I think they're probably doing a good tack there with not showing too much. Because if people like, okay, this is literally just a shot-for-shot with weirder-looking CG animals, like I don't know. I feel like that would be putting a damper on things. But I don't know. Maybe you're right.
I mean, I just feel like the marketing could be, I don't know, like, at least in Lion King's perspective, just a little better. I mean, I think Frozen 2, at least as of now, I think that's been okay because, the film is like 4 months out or whatever it is, almost 5 months out, whatever it is. And for Star Wars, I mean, I think that was okay so far. But yeah, I mean, I guess even a film like Far Away From Home, they were kind of hampered with like the whole Endgame stuff. But even that, like, I didn't even know this for Far From Home, but like, I looked it up. Like, I thought in the trailer, you know how there's like that big fire guy and then there's like the big water guy? Like, I actually thought those were powers of Mysterio, but they're like their own villains.
Oh, well.
Like, I mean, that's not like we haven't seen the movie yet, so it's not a spoiler. Like, I just read that online. I was even thinking, like, well, they could have maybe mentioned, like, somehow filmed it or shot it in a way that that's not like an illusion or a power of Mysterio's. I mean, I guess I don't know if that's gonna impact the box office.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I see that. My biggest takeaways from the trailers is that it's another high school movie and it takes place in Italy on like a high school vacation. That's a fantastic setup to me. So I'm in based on that alone. But I don't know. What do you think is going to be? Was Maleficent also your answer in terms of the biggest?
I think out of that
bomb.
But I will also say this, that I feel like out of Lion King, Frozen 2, and Episode 9, I just have a feeling that based on how the box office is going this year, that one of the three of those is going to underperform. I don't know which one for sure yet, but I just feel like earlier this year, like when I was thinking about the movies coming out this year, like I was thinking about their box office numbers, like I seriously thought that at one time I thought Lion King was almost like a lock to do $2 billion. I thought Frozen could get like 1.8, 1.9 billion. And I thought Episode 9 would probably do 1.5, 1.6 billion. But now, I just don't. I don't think all. I think one of the three will not do as well as at least I had initially thought. I don't know which one of those yet. Because, I mean, even like for Frozen 2, I mean, that's another one where, I mean, because when did the first one come out? Like 2012 or 13?
13, I think.
So, I mean, even that's been 6 years later. I mean, again, I know that's a slightly different audience than, because it's more girl-oriented, I guess, than like Lego and...
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, what was the other one we mentioned earlier? No, Maleficent, that was also kind of girl-oriented, I guess.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that the gender specifics make too much of a difference. Frozen, it's made its way into our cultural lexicon, the Let It Go. Yeah. I feel like that's more relevant still than something like the Lego movie was.
But do you think Frozen 2, do you think it was too many years?
We'll see. I mean, it's a few years, but like I think still that Frozen didn't... With the Lego movie, we mentioned that they released the Lego Batman movie and then the Ninjago movie, and there's just so much Lego everywhere. And the Lego video games, I feel like there's kind of diluting the market with Lego stuff and makes it less special. Whereas Frozen, there's just Frozen. Yeah, there's the Disney show at Disneyland or California Adventure, and I think the musical just recently came out on Broadway last year or earlier this year.
And there's like a little short, right?
Yeah, there was that short on Christmas time last year. But I think all that helps to keep it relevant, but not to the point where people are going to be like, oh, I'm so over Frozen by the time Frozen 2 comes out. Not that that's what happened with Lego movie. I think Frozen 2, if it's a good movie, The trailers seem odd to me because they're taking that weird dark.
Yeah, they also went back to dark. Like, yeah,
I'm not sure how that's going to work or fit in with the. I mean, the first movie is pretty dark, but everything that they've shown in the trailer, like, it kind of just makes it seem very intense.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, they've just released the initial trailer, so I'm curious on that one.
Well, of those three, Frozen 2, Lion King, and Episode 9, if you had to just guess which of those three do you think will, like, underperform to what people's expectations are, like, which one of those three do you think will?
I would say Frozen 2.
Okay.
I think Lion King has a built-in kind of guarantee for an audience, and Star Wars definitely does, even more so. Frozen, like you said, it was 6 years ago, and if this movie doesn't, if it somehow betrays what made the first movie so beloved, and if the soundtrack doesn't have that
that's
one
a very
ballad,
good point.
like Let It Go, I mean, it has a lot to live up to in that regard. I just think it's going to fall flat at people's expectations, and that could impact its box office.
I agree with. I mean, I feel like, yeah, I definitely agree with you that I think, and maybe we might be wrong, so then we listen back to this in 2 weeks, we'll look like fools, but, like, I agree with you that I think Lion King, I mean, with these live action Disney films, I mean, yeah, Dumbo didn't necessarily do that great, but Dumbo is a very old property, so there's not a lot of people that are huge Dumbo fans. They might like the elephant himself, but they don't really know about the plot. But, like, you know, even you look at a film like Aladdin, I think Aladdin has done better than most people thought. Like, Beauty and the Beast made whatever, over $1 billion. Like, Jungle Book almost made $1 billion. Like, I don't see Lion King doing worse than those for sure. And you're right with, like, for Frozen, you know, it's been a number of years, but I actually think there's a possibility that Episode 9 actually does worse than Episode 8 in box office. Like, in the revenue. Like, I don't think Episode 9 will do as bad as, like, the Solo film, because I think Solo didn't even do $400 million worldwide.
Oh, domestically?
Oh, no, worldwide. Solo. Like, Solo was...
Really?
Yeah, Solo was a bomb. That actually was. Like, I don't think Episode 9 will do as poorly as Solo, but I could see Episode 9, you know, maybe doing something more like maybe a little over $1 billion, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked.
So your choice of those three, you're saying
Star
Wars Episode 9 is going to be a disappointment.
Well, yeah, of the three, probably the most disappointing. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but I mean, you do raise some good points. The one thing there are several things going for Star Wars. You know, the fact that, you know, there's the intrigue again of an Abrams movie, and Abrams does that very well with movies where, you know, there's just a lot of intrigue around it. You know, so you hear the Emperor's voice and you hear Luke Skywalker, and you're like, well, this is intriguing. And then the Death Star, you're like, this is intriguing. Like, you know, there's a lot of things where you're like, what the heck is this? So he does really good. At least the people that work with him that craft the trailers for his movies, they make everything seem like it's a murder mystery. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll just have to see. But yeah, I mean, for Frozen 2, that is way up in the air, because if it's just a really good because there's a possibility that Frozen 2 could turn into this year's Wreck-It Ralph. Like,
I hope not. But you're right. I mean, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, because I mean, Wreck-It Ralph 2, I think that was also 6 years, I think, between Wreck-It Ralph 1 and 2. And I mean, I thought Wreck-It Ralph 2 was fine. I mean, I didn't like it as much as the first one.
I wasn't a fan of it.
Yeah, and I just kind of felt like, you know, the whole novelty of the first one and everything, just so kind of like this idea of this big crossover video game movie. Like, I kind of felt like the sequel didn't really capture that at all. But, like, yeah, I mean, for Frozen 2, it could be the same thing, where maybe people say, oh, it's not as good. And if there's not the song, and if they're just like, yeah, it was, you know, it's fine. I mean, I saw whatever Elsa do this or that, or she has greater powers or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I don't know, though, but I guess...
It had more of a... Well, to me, the trailers make it seem like it's more of a superhero movie with Elsa being the superhero. That's the vibe I got.
Yeah, exactly. That's weird, the vibe that I'm getting from it. 'Cause I never saw the first Frozen, but like...
Oh, you gotta watch it.
Yeah. But
you have to watch that in Zootopia.
I know, I haven't seen it. Yeah, I haven't seen it. But like in this, you're right. Like, I mean, the trailer, you know, the big part, at least the thing I remember the most from the trailer is like, you know, her running on like the ice on the water or the wave.
Yeah.
And like that to me kind of seems like this is like a superhero testing out his powers kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well,
and I mean, that wasn't really the first Frozen, right?
No. I mean, she has the power. I mean, she has it since she was young, and she just never learned how to control it. That scene, in particular, that scene with her running on the beach trying to get over the wave, it reminded me of Castaway when Tom Hanks is trying to get over that wave line there on this little rickety raft, with Wilson.
Yeah.
if he had the power to turn water into ice, it might have been a little easier. Although even then, it seems hard because she's failing a few times.
She was failing.
So of this year, like looking back to we're at the halfway point or a little past the halfway point. What's your most memorable movie or like your favorite movie that you've seen this year that came out?
That's a really good. Yeah, that's a really. That's a good question. I mean, I really liked John Wick 3 a lot. Yeah, John Wick 3 I really liked. Like even Aladdin, I really liked that. Like the first time I went into Aladdin thinking I wasn't going to like it. And the first time I watched it, I thought it was pretty good. And the second time, I even thought it was better. I don't know. I'd have to think about it because I've seen a lot of the big releases. Like I haven't seen like every single one of them. Like I didn't see Chucky and I didn't see the newest Conjuring, and I haven't seen literally every movie, but I guess my biggest thought would be this year is that there was just a lot of, I don't know, just kind of like mediocre stuff, I guess. Like I've just been kind of underwhelmed, I guess.
I agree. I'm trying to think. Usually there's a few movies a year where like I'll see them and I'll like them a lot, and then I'll end up seeing them again.
Yeah.
And in this case this year, I think in the theaters, I saw Endgame 3 times, and some of that's a function of seeing it with different people who want to go see it, and I just also wanted to see it again. Can't think of another big movie that I saw in theaters twice. I don't think so.
What wasn't even a film like yesterday? Like, was that something that you really liked, or
no? So I haven't seen it yet, but I'm definitely going to see it because that movie's right up my alley. As a big Beatles fan, I'm also just a fan of
Danny Boyle too, right?
Danny Boyle. I think that Richard Curtis, the screenwriter.
Okay.
But that movie overperformed, right? Based on estimates, it made $17 million this weekend, and
that's pretty good.
I think that's a win for this summer, or at least this year. As a whole, you had the Booksmart and Long Shot and what's the third? Late Night.
Yeah.
All those 3 kind of disappointed in terms of that counter-programming, adult-oriented fare. So this one seems to have done well, although I think that the trailers were everywhere. I just was inundated with yesterday stuff, so I can't imagine that the marketing was of a indie budget.
Oh no, I definitely, even though it might have had the production budget of a smaller film, like you're right, like the marketing budget was huge, and
I think so.
So that was all over the place, but
I'm going back to the movies. There are 2 movies that I know that I've seen multiple times this year.
Okay.
That came out this year, and they're both Netflix movies. So maybe this speaks to it. One of them is probably my favorite movie of the year so far that's been released, is Always Be My Maybe. And just because I had such a great time watching it, as soon as it was done, I wanted to watch it again, and I think I did the next day. And the other one was a movie that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it was a movie called Triple Frontier. It was a Netflix movie with Ben Affleck.
Oh, yeah, they're like soldiers.
Yeah.
Is it that one?
Yeah. Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac. I don't know.
The guy from Sons of Anarchy.
It was mediocre in the way that it was mediocre for a theatrical film, I think, but for a Netflix experience for me, I was like, hey, this was as a thing to have on. I started it when I was vacuuming, right? I was like, I'm gonna put this on while I vacuum this room. But then naturally I was done vacuuming, and I sat down to actually watch the movie, and I was pleasantly surprised. And then I watched it again with Taylor. Because I was like, hey, this is a pretty decent movie. Let's check it out.
Well, if you're vacuuming and watching a movie, then that
it doesn't. Well, this is the problem with the Netflix movies, right? But I gave my second time watching it. I did not do any kind of cleaning, so there's that.
For that movie, what'd you call it? It's called Triple Frontier.
Yeah.
I saw there was a report. I forgot who wrote it, but they're basically saying that Netflix now is going to start cutting down on the number of big budget projects they're going to be working on, because I guess that they consider that film a flop. I don't know how Netflix figures out what's a flop and what's not a flop, but I guess in their minds it's a flop. But you raise an interesting point with Netflix in that, do you feel like how things are right now in the box office, do you think this is sustainable how things are now, or do you think there's something that's going to change in the sense that especially in the summertime in America, there's virtually, it seems like almost every weekend there's a film that comes out that has $100 million budget or more, right? Do you feel like because all these films have underperformed, because again, it's not a simple math equation where it's okay, we spent $150 million making this movie, and then, we spent another, whatever it is, $100 million marketing it. So everything over $250 million is profit. Like, that's not like how these things work. Like, oftentimes, you'll have like investors, and sometimes the marketing is more, and sometimes the production budget's more. So, I mean, it's not just a simple like, oh, well, if our cost to make the film is $275 million and we make $400 million, like, we're happy with that. Like, oftentimes, movie studios will not be happy with that, and that will stop a film from getting a sequel. But, like, I don't know. Do you think that if we go on these kind of trajectory that we're going now, could you see something where, like, maybe we see a far lesser number of blockbusters come out each year, and then just more things going straight to streaming, and just kind of, instead of having, theoretically 50 blockbuster films every year, we really are going to get maybe something more like a 10, and then everything else just go to streaming? I mean, do you think, could we be headed towards basically a total falling out of the whole middle class in the film industry?
That's a big question. I'm sorry, I'm pausing because I'm thinking about it. My initial reaction is no, only because I don't think that, I just don't think that's how studios think. I think that the general thinking is that if you spend a lot of money on something, it's going to yield a lot of return. It seems to be that's how they operate. Otherwise, why would... I mean, this is not the first year that we've had a down year.
No,
this has been I feel like this has been a story for years. I mean, as long as, the whole 2000s has been, are movies dying? Is this the end of the block? Whatever the narrative is in that particular summer. Except for, some summers are exceptional. Then you have a downturn, and then it turns to that same narrative of what's going on. And nothing's changed really. I haven't seen the strategy shift, and if it does shift, is it going to be to streaming? I mean, we talk about that a lot. Maybe, and that makes sense, but then there's also only so much room on those streaming platforms and so much money to go around. So either the number of movies in total is going to have to get lower, or the studios are going to have to start investing in more reasonable projects, bring back that mid-tier. I would think it would cause a resurgence in it, not necessarily like a decimation of it. But I don't know. I mean, it's a little. It reminds me a little bit of like the video game argument, where every year it seems like, especially in the last console cycle, like the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, there was, the numbers are dwindling. This is going to be the last generation of the traditional home console. And then this current generation came out with the PS4, and it sold far better than anyone expected, and there's a resurgence. And moving forward, we'll see what it is. I don't think that we're ever going to see, at least not in the near future, to see like a truly all streaming future where it's just going to be all, here's this Netflix-like gaming service, and we're just going to stream everything, and it's all going to be on one box. I don't foresee that happening. And in the same token, I don't see the theater experience or the distribution strategies shifting that drastically in the next 5 to 10 years.
I mean, I fundamentally, I agree with you. I think that there might be a constriction of some big budget films. So maybe the number will go from 50 to maybe something more like 35, something like that. But like, even the idea, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but like, it might sound like if I say this, but like, with the streaming services, like I actually read an article today, I forgot who published it, but they were basically saying how there's too many options now on streaming services, that like there's too many streaming services, and there's just so much stuff on there that it almost is kind of like turning people off. And that might sound weird, or it's
or it causes
the paralysis.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, in the coming years, within the next few years, there's going to be Disney Plus. I mean, we'll have to see if Apple actually goes through with their Apple Plus.
I'm fairly certain they are. They have a lot of things in the lineup.
I mean, and like Warner Bros. Is going to have their own streaming service. Universal's going to have their own streaming service. Yeah. Netflix is... I mean, there's going to be so many streaming services that, like, I don't see one person having 8 streaming services. I mean, I just don't think that that'll happen. So I think that there'll have to be some kind of consolidation or some kind of a la carte thing, where I don't know how that would look or how that's going to operate. But yeah, and I also think with streaming services too, that, I mean, I know a lot of people watch them at their homes, but like, I also just think, we kind of mentioned it when you mentioned the Triple Frontier film. Like, okay, so that's a film that I think the production budget was like $115 million.
Was it?
It was a huge production budget. I think I remember, I might be off a little bit, but it was a big budget, and they also spent money marketing the film, right? So it's like, if you're a company like a Netflix, like, does it really behoove you to spend all that money on making a film like that, or buying a film like that? I forgot if they commissioned or just bought it, but like, does that really behoove you to have that stuff, or just to have Friends and The Office, and just because people watch that, and all you have to do is just pay, the syndication amount of money, right? So like,
they're losing. They're
losing. Yeah, I mean, if you are these streaming services, like, even like, with Disney Plus, like, there's a lot of talk about, The Mandalorian and their MCU shows that they have coming out, the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, whatever. Like, even for that, it's like, I mean, how do you measure like the success for that? Like, I mean, we talked about that for that murder mystery film with Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston, where it's like, okay, like, that film had a lot of people that watched it, and you sent me the article where it was like the number of people that watched that movie when it came out, if it had come out in theaters, would have been like $120 million opening. Like, I guess I just look at a film like that and I think to myself, I mean, are people watching this stuff because they really want to watch it, or is it because it's free, or would they pay to have Netflix to have access to that stuff, or do they just watch that stuff because it's a byproduct of them having Netflix?
Probably a little of this, little of that. I mean,
yeah, and that's the biggest issue. And like, for these streaming services, like, Netflix, their whole thing is right now they're trying to build up as much original content now because they know all these other companies or studios are going to pull all their content out eventually. So then they're trying to build up this like library. But I mean, they spend so much money on their stuff, and it's like, it's really hard to tell like if it's actually yielding results. Like a film like Bright, does Bright or the murder mystery or all this other random Adam Sandler stuff, like, are people paying to have Netflix to watch that stuff? I mean, I guess they must know because they're doing it, but
yeah, I have no idea how they gauge their numbers, or like if they release a movie like Murder Mystery or Bright, and then the number of subscription spikes in the week that follows, is it contributed to that? I mean, I have no idea how that's tracked, or if that's the case. If you can vacuum, right? You could be vacuuming or dusting or polishing silverware or what have you, and you put on Murder Mystery. I feel like that's what it's meant for. I think that's what that type of viewing is meant for, and that's why a movie like Roma coming out on Netflix was a little strange. Yeah. And I did, well, on the one hand, I don't think it helped it because that movie is so specifically designed to be in a dark theater and where your attention is fully focused, because especially for a lot of people who watch movies on Netflix, they're not looking necessarily for that type of a deep kind of film experience, and one that's more for the cinephile, right? Where you're going to appreciate the cinematography and appreciate the beauty of what you're watching. Sometimes you want to sit there and do whatever. I mean, you're going to vacuum, you're going to Netflix and chill, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, you're cooking dinner, you're doing other stuff.
But at the same time, like, I think a lot more people saw it, or at least entertained the idea of watching it, because like, hey, this movie came out in theaters, in a few theaters across the country, but like, it's right here, and it's nominated for Oscars, and let me check it out, even though it's a black and white, half Spanish, half some native language, right? I don't even know the name of the language, but and I don't know. What is the future? I think I would hope. My hope is that all these services are just supplementary to the primary theater going experience. Like I definitely think that the box office and studios as a whole would benefit from. Yeah, don't release $50-100 million plus budgeted movies in the same summer or in the same year. That just, they crowd each other. You dilute the market. You do it so frequently. I keep on thinking back to video games because I think they do that same thing. Call of Duty comes out every single year like clockwork, and the quality depreciates and people's interest depreciates to some extent. I mean, they still sell huge numbers, but it's like at a certain point there's a tipping point and you're going to pass it, and then people are not going to be interested anymore. And maybe we're at that point with this wave of comic book movies that kind of started in like 2001 or 2 with Spider-Man. I mean, it's been a long time. That's almost 20 years of this type of box office strategy where it's just all IP. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon, but I think it needs to be interspersed with other types of films. I'm not saying it has to be the Romas of the world or like movies like, I mean, I think movies like Yesterday would benefit, but I think a lot of those are going towards the streaming things.
Yeah, because Yesterday, that's a quintessential streaming type movie. Yeah, like a lower budgeted type of thing. But yeah, I mean, maybe something what you're talking about is maybe more like your Inceptions or Chris Nolan's the movie coming out next year, the Tenet movie, where it's like it is a big budget film, but it's also but it's not that whole it's like it's big budget and it's based on an original idea. And like, it's not just another, like, at least it's not a known IP where it's like, oh, here's another Spider-Man, and here's another this.
To me, like, the movie theater at its best, or the movie-going experience, is like, it's an act of discovery. You're going into this dark sanctuary of a place, and it's air-conditioned, and it's quiet, and whenever that thing comes up on screen, it's like you could find something totally unknown to you and absolutely fall in love. At the same token, you could hate it, but that's kind of the risk you take with anything when you go spend your money on something as a consumer. But if we are going to see Toy Story 4, or, well, that's a bad thing to start with, but a Godzilla movie, or another Spider-Man movie, or another Dark Phoenix X-Men movie, or another Men in Black movie, it's like, it's not that same thrill. We're not explorers going to chart some going to explore some uncharted territory. It's just like we're going around in circles, following our own footsteps from, like, in some cases 10 years ago, in some cases like 2 years ago, and it's kind of tiring. I mean, I don't necessarily want to I don't want that to be my perception of going to the theater. It's like, oh, I'm just going here because I feel like people are now going more so for the experience of, like, I want to have dinner and a drink and recline in my leather sofa chair, and that's why I pay to go see the movie, as opposed to going to see the movie itself and discovering something. That's why I love guys like Christopher Nolan. I think is incredible because he does have that. I mean, and he's a unique filmmaker, but I mean, everything he does. Interstellar is such an incredible gamble of a movie, and he's able to do it because he has that reputation. But when you go see a movie like that, it's like, wow, that, to me, that's cinema at its best. Or it's not even something like Inception. I'm like, wow, this is not something I ever expected, and it is fully taking advantage of what this is, of being in this
taking advantage of the medium.
Yeah, it's incredible, and that's on the grand scale. But then on the smaller scale, things like, I don't know, The Favorite, or I'm thinking of movies last year, like Crazy Rich Asians. Like, I don't think anyone was. I didn't expect that movie at all. I didn't even see a trailer before I saw it. I just went into the theater, and I was so surprised at what I felt like I made a discovery, right? And to me, it's so rewarding when you go to the theater and have that experience. And it is rewarding sometimes on Netflix. Like, I've just put on random movies on Netflix that are Netflix movies and been surprised by them. Like Always Be My Maybe. Like, I didn't have any expectations for it, but I had a fun time watching it. And that's why it's like one of my top movies of the year so far. But yeah, I think people are looking for that sense of discovery, and it just creates excitement.
Well, I think one thing that you kind of mentioned, that something that I'm not a huge fan of contemporary movie theaters, is that, like, I've always been a person where I think it's fine, like, if you want to, like, eat or drink during a movie, and I do that, but, like, the whole idea of, okay, so, buying a meal and then, like, almost lying down in your chair watching a movie, it's almost like when you think about movie theaters are basically trying to become your home.
Right.
Your home is trying to become your movie theater. Especially, like, you got a gigantic TV, and it's like, you turn the lights off.
Surround sound.
The experiences in some regards are very similar to one another. And I mean, there's not necessarily anything, like, inherently wrong with that, but, like, I do kind of like, like watching a movie not having, like, a full course meal in front of me. Like, I remember when I watched A Quiet Place at one of those movie theaters that have that. Yeah. And, like, I sat next to a family. It was like a husband and wife and their kid. And, like, I mean, they had, it seemed like they had like a 3-course meal. Like, they had so much, like, food coming and going. And I was just like, man, like, I kind of actually ruined the movie experience for me. Like, I actually had to watch it a second time in a movie theater that didn't have servers. And, yeah, I mean, in some movies, I guess it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Like, if the servers are coming and going. But yeah, I guess, I mean, I think going forward, I think this whole idea too, this whole streaming boom that's happening, I kind of also feel like there'll be some constriction on that, because I think after a while these studios are going to probably, especially when they have their own streaming services, I think they're going to, like, come to the realization of, like, wow, like, we're spending a lot of money on this stuff, and is it necessarily yielding results? I don't know. I guess what I think, I wouldn't be shocked if there was almost like a, maybe 5 years or 10 years from now, if there was kind of a boom of, like, more, like, mid to low budget stuff that was being put in, like, in theaters, and then also especially, like, on streaming services. Because I don't know, I mean, I feel like if you take a gamble on a show and you only spend $10 million making a whole season, rather than, I mean, I don't know the cost for television shows, but let's say if you could spend $10 million making $10 10 episodes rather than, like try to make a new big Stranger Things. It's, 150 million, let's just say theoretically. Like, I don't know. I guess I could probably see them doing a, a lower budget thing, but I don't know. I guess those whole streaming numbers, I mean, God only knows what their actual their numbers even are for anything. But yeah, so I kind of think, I guess, in conclusion for this episode, I mean, the box office, like you said, I mean, it's not horrible, but I will say that the saving graces so far this year have been Endgame, Captain Marvel, basically Disney.
Yeah.
I mean, as of right now, the fourth highest grossing film this year is the Chinese film, The Wandering Earth. Or Wandering Earth. I mean, again, we're halfway past this year. I mean, at this point last year, if you have 5 of the highest grossing films of 2018 had already come out by now, and then the 6th would join it. So, I mean, it's not good, but it's not abysmal. But yeah, definitely, if I was the CEO of Regal or AMC or one of these other large movie theater chains, I would definitely thank Disney, because my gosh, like the highest grossing, I guess I'll look it up right now, the highest grossing non-Disney film for this year worldwide, pull that up. That can't be. Well, what do you think it is off the top of your head, if you had to take a guess?
Man, I can't think of anything. I think of John Wick, but that's definitely not one of the highest grossing.
No. All right, so the 5th highest grossing film of the year is The How to Train Your Dragon. So Universal. And then Toy Story is going to surpass that, and probably within a few days. So if it wasn't for Disney, as of right now, the highest grossing film of the year would be How to Train Your Dragon 3, with a worldwide gross of $519 million, which is $180 million less than the Chinese film The Wandering Earth.
Wow.
That's really bad.
That's pretty bad.
But all right, well, Danny, thank you for coming on, and definitely, guys, check out next week's episode. The box office comp for next week is the Wild Wild West movie with Will Smith and Far From Home.
Yeah, don't forget Kevin Kline.
I know a lot of people look back at Wild Wild West and think that it was a load of crap, or the movie was crappy, but I actually kind of liked it. But we'll dive more into that later.
Get into that later.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. We'll see you guys.
Thanks. Bye.